And it looks like Francisco not the most scared of Ragavan anymore. With 6 lands in play, Sam's not going to be getting a huge mana advantage and likely is about to cast a Leyline Binding or something similar here.
Yeah,
Take out the
prismatic ending.
Ragavan. Yeah,
At
prismatic.
instant speed, thanks to Teferi's +1.
So hold on. That can't be. Either that's not a prismatic ending or Francisco has not companion Karuga, right? So what something we're
Oh,
missing here.
that's true. Is that an old art leyline binding? I mean, it
Does
could have
that
been a
exist?
Kihira. All we saw was a companion that went into.
Okay.
We are missing something,
We're missing
for sure.
something, but there is a removal spell being cast at instant speed on that Ragavan.
And it looks shockingly like a prismatic ending.
It does look a lot like a prismatic ending, so I'm guessing that this is not a Karuga list over here.
Yeah. Well, all we've seen is that a Fabled Mirrorbreaker is in Francisco's deck, and there's a glary companion in his hand. So
Yes.
with the information we just have, I believe. Yep,
Yeah, and
Kihira.
that is a Kihira in his hand, so uh looks like we are just a kind of normal a deck that exists within the normal constraints of Magic deck construction in Modern. You don't need to cut your cheap cards because our payoff is just a little 3/2 that is left in Francisco's hand here. And now Francisco pretty low on resources after that Thoughtseize.
Yeah, the Sam took the Solitude because, reveal Solitude and Kihira. You're definitely not taking the Kihira.
Yes. uh, and so
So
now
now,
Sam just sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say now Sam is free to deploy threats, uh, which could be anything, but not gonna be a grief as the mana fury. So looks like we're maybe scamming a no, we're just dealing 4 to a Teferi.
Yeah, I mean, we can't scam right now because there is a Teferi in play, so you cannot respond to your sacrifice trigger with a Malakir Rebirth or anything like that. So Teferi really does put a damper on like the primary plans of the scam deck. Of course, the primary
Yeah.
plan of the scam deck is to do its scamming on turn 1 or 2.
There's a Dothy Voidwalker from Sam. Francisco follows up with a good old Kahira.
Yeah, tough to block the Shadow 3/2 with your more or less vanilla 3/2 though. So this is probably going to take this Teferi out unless Francisco drew something this turn.
Yeah, we'll see. Because if Dothy Voidwalker is, oh, here we go. Looks like a fire. So
Yeah,
this still can't be responded to thanks to Teferi. So even if Sam did have a rebirth card, not going to be effective here.
yeah. And I still haven't been able to see what is in Sam's hand. I mean, probably
Well,
some
this
of
is a
looks like a
Kolaghan's command.
Kolaghan's command. Looks like he does also have a grief in his hand.
So the modes are going to be Shock Teferi and Get Back a Creature. Sam is deciding between Dothy Voidwalker and Fury. Dothy Voidwalker is obviously castable. Not this turn, but next, guaranteed. And is a lot more, I guess, a little flexible, but Fury goes for Fury.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the thought process there is that he also has this grief in hand. So if he, doesn't draw a land next turn and then wants to grief and has to sacrifice his treasure, then he's really far off of like hard casting that fury. And we are at the point of the game where hard casting elementals is a big part of what both players are trying to do. But I think that just the value represented by the Fury when there's at least a 3/2 in play on the other side and possibly, more planeswalkers coming that he has to deal with. Dealing with Omnath is really, really important, and having an answer to a top decked Omnath would make a huge difference. So kind of takes a little bit of the safer route here.
So Croxa comes out to clean up Francisco's hand. It was an island, so he loses 3 life. And Sam's draw for the turn was Terminate there, but chooses not to use that on Kahira because he doesn't want to lose the treasure. Any land makes Fury kill Kahira as well. Ooh, this is a good top deck for
That's not a
Francisco.
bad draw.
Yeah, expressive iteration.
Both players, it
Yeah, it
looks
looks
like
like
at a very low life total here. So, although that can be less relevant for the scam, the scam player's life total can be less relevant with the 3/2 on the other side. There can be some damage represented here that could really put him in a pinch. And this Blood Moon is going to really constrict what can happen over the next couple of turns of the game.
Yeah, so now Sam has only one black source available to him, the treasure token. And actually, there's a
Yeah,
swamp too, so
there's a swamp
Kroxa
as well.
can be hardcast here. Oh,
Yeah,
so we're doing Kroxa.
I that makes a lot of sense here. Definitely stops that 3-2. Francisco gonna have to have something else that he got off of that expressive iteration. We didn't see what the card that ended up in his hand is. If it is a removal spell, ideally a solitude for Francisco then.
Oh, there it
Uh
is.
yeah, and but yeah, only one card left in hand that's just gonna get lost to the Croxa. So really no way for Francisco to go here against this 6/6.
Another iteration off the top.
Top decking another iteration.
Though I do think I see another Blood Moon, which is certainly worse than the first one.
Yes.
Now Sam can't play or can't hard cast the Grief in his hand, but he still is out to drawing another land to play Fury. Any land at this point comes to play untapped because of Blood Moon.
Francisco exiling a mountain effectively. Lands he's got untapped are, 4 mountains and 1 plains because he had to use his island to cast that expressive iteration. So a lot of stuff not super castable here. If that is a solitude in his hand, it
Yep,
can't take
here we
out this
go.
Croxa. And this is probably it was another
Oh, it was an
iteration.
a third disc expressive iteration as the card he kept, which gets discarded to Kroxa after Sam like cracks in for 1,000,000 damage off this Fury, cleaning up the Geara. So now Francisco has one card to deal with both Fury and Kroxa. Uh, that's going to be with just one white mana, one blue mana.
Yeah, Supreme
You would
Verdict
need
both
to
not in the main deck
Teferi
and
into something.
yeah. And even that doesn't really permanently solve any of these problems.
Right. And once you cast Teferi, you're out of colored mana or out of non-red mana. So
That's
you'd have to
that's
draw
true.
like Fury and then Fury the Fury. But then you have Kroxa, Sam has Kroxa in hand, and you just lose to the Kroxa trigger.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like there's always going to be Croaxa representing that last couple of points of damage. You have to have spells in your hand the whole time to discard to it, and that's just not something that Francisco can maintain here. I mean, he's definitely just got his not even back up against the wall. I don't think there's any way for him to climb out of this.
Yeah, we'll see what his last card is. He's definitely thinking about it, so maybe he's not just dead.
But this is really the power of the scam deck. It has the ability to have those really quick, you know, turn one grief Malakir rebirth double thoughtseize you put a 4/3 menace into play. This will probably kill you before you can do anything relevant. It has that capability, but a lot of the cards that compose that engine are just the elementals, which are great to cast for 4 or 5 mana. And then, Malakir Rebirth is a land. And sometimes you can use your scam rebirth type cards to keep from dying or to keep your creatures from dying. So this deck, while you know, it is named Rakdos Scam, it actually has the ability to play out some like real longer magic games and do a lot. So ice to tap
Okay.
down the Croxa here.
And then a card drawn, but I don't know what. Yeah, there's no instant that can clean up a Fury. That's one of the things Four Colors really struggled with.
Yeah.
Also, one point there, Sam did draw a second swamp, so could have cast the Grease pre-combat, but chose not to, just in
Mhm.
case Francisco like survived that turn, I guess.
Sure. I don't think it's really relevant how you sequence that grief there, but
Yeah, it does stop the ice from. Yeah, it probably doesn't do anything.
yeah,
They're dead or they're not.
right. And they have to play all their removal spells at instant speed. Looks like players do have deck lists for this tournament, or at least for this portion of the tournament. I'll admit that I am not completely caught up on the rules of the modern main event, but players are going to have full information of their opponent's 75 while making their sideboarding decisions here. What kind of changes do you think these players are likely making to their decks post board?
I mean, Sam on the scam side just wants more cards that goes along. Like if he's playing Torok, Dreadcanter, that's an excellent answer typically to the white side of Francisco's deck. It just kind of leaves him to Fury and Fire.
Mhm.
And Turok itself grows outside of fire range pretty quickly if you can kick it. Uh, on more of Francisco's side, uh, you're really looking at just kind of how the deck is constructed. Uh, Typically, there's more removal in the sideboard, like Veil of Summer. Well, Veil of Summer's not removal, but you would board it in here.
Yes.
And Supreme Verdict, I think, are the main ones.
Yeah, I mean, Supreme Verdict could be a possibility just because it is an answer to Fury and to Turok, which can be difficult to remove with some of the other removal spells in your deck. So I don't hate it here, although it can be very awkward, especially when they're just doing stuff early on or just putting out threats one at a time. Supreme Verdict is not a great answer to Ragavan, for instance, but it may be just something that you need. A lot of these lists have a large number of Veil of Summers in the sideboard, and with Francisco on the play, this game with a Veil in hand, he can rest easy that he's not going to get griefed out of the game, or even just countering a Thoughtseize with a Veil is very, very powerful.
Francisco has extra dress downs in the sideboard. That's also pretty good. You
Hmm.
do have to be a little judicious with it. You usually want to use it in response to a hard cast uh, elemental or in response to like a Valkyrie Rebirth trigger or something like that.
Hmm.
But you can mitigate the impact of all of Sam's cards. You just don't want to let him sneak a Kroxa into play.
Yes, be very careful with the timing of your dress downs.
It
Also,
also disables the protection from white and the shadow on some of
mm,
the random scam creatures,
sure,
which does let your battlefield actually deal with them, as opposed to trying to draw one of your few red cards that does it.
yep, makes sense.
I'm not sure Sam is really looking to board all that much. It just really depends on the composition of his sideboard. Usually, I see stuff like Blood Moon, which would be good against Francisco. The change to Yorion going away means that you see your fewer abundant growths and such. So the four color deck is a lot more susceptible to that mana disruption. The Blood Moon previously had not been good against.
Yeah, and I think those Blood Moons in the four color control deck probably coming out against the Rakdos Scam deck. As long as Sam fetches a basic swamp or two, then the Blood Moon isn't going to be affecting him at all. And
I mean,
was
I think the Blood Moon on Francisco's side was not very good.
it was actively bad.
It really disrupted his mana much more than Sam's, even though Sam had a higher percentage of his lands cut off by it, like 75% of his lands at the time of Blood Moon was cast.
Well, but they were
The
only
friend,
cut off into being mountains, which is half of
yeah, which is half of his
the
colors.
spells in his deck. So I mean, you
Uh,
live by the Blood Moon in your four color deck. You die by the Blood Moon in your four color deck.
and maybe that's some sign that Sam wouldn't want to board in Blood Moon if Francisco's playing them in his main deck. Maybe he does have access to abundant growth or mana fixing of that nature.
Hmm.
But he didn't fetch like he was planning on playing a Blood Moon that game, so I imagine not a huge tell on Francisco's part.
Yeah, and clearly, just like that expressive iteration just wasn't very good if he took a Blood Moon off of it, and was just kind of hoping that it would stop something because Sam had more resources than him. If he could use the Blood Moon to keep some cards stuck in Sam's hand, then it was better than nothing. But ended up working out just pretty badly for him.
All right, so we've got gameplay and the tiny little window. When Honoron gets back from running around, we'll make it larger. But
Yes,
I can see that looks like we're doing a little bit of turn one action. I can't quite make it out. Looks like a grief to me.
yeah, and that looks like maybe a veil there stopping that
I think
grief.
that was a subtlety
Is
because
that
the
a
grief
subtlety?
headed back on top of the library.
Yep.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
casting from the very small window at the bottom of the screen. So it's it's a challenge.
Yeah, you're right. Francisco also like put a blue card to the side, so that's a pretty big tell that you're casting a force style card there, I suppose.
Yeah, there's another Shockland entering play tapped, and then a removal spell looks like a prismatic ending to get rid of Ragavan. And then we're scamming again. Here's grief pitching another grief, it looks like. And solitude in response, targeting the grief.
Yeah, that's the powerful thing about the grief scam combo is that you get one of the grief's triggers before you commit to casting your Malika Rebirth on it. So your opponent has to, if they're going to take out the grief at instant speed, unless they have multiple instant speed removal spells in their hand, they have to go for it first.
Okay, now we've got the big camera, thankfully. So Francisco just revealed a land to the grief and did not discard it, which is why he preempted the solitude. And now possibly gearing up for some 3-mana play. We know Teferi and Fable are both in the deck.
Yeah, and he's really got to hope to have a play here, or else that Ragavan is going to just start getting hits, and anything that it flips here that Sam can cast is going to be pretty good. Fortunately for Francisco, it probably takes like 2 treasure tokens to cast a
Oof.
lot of the spells that it could flip.
We are simply putting Kahira in hand.
Yeah, not an ideal spot to be in. Ragavan going to come in, going to hit Chalice.
Yeah, probably not casting that one.
No, it's not great. Chalice brought in to shut down the rebirth type shenanigans. Just a lot of the cards in the scam deck do cost 1 mana. Thoughtseize, Lightning Bolt, if that's still in.
Looks like we're
Ragavan costs a
casting it
single
for
mana.
0. So this stops any Mishra's Baubles that Francisco may have, but Sam does not have any 0-cost cards in his deck, so he is fine casting it for 0.
Sure.
Francisco cracks another fetch land. Uh, Hopefully he has a play better than Kahira, because I don't know if Kahira could, you know, stand the pressure that Ragavan with 4 cards in Sam's hand will withstand.
Boy, is that 4 cards? I was having a hard time seeing, but yeah, unlikely to get to block that
It might
Ragavan.
be only 3. Oh, here's Kahira.
Well, Sam hasn't had to kill anything yet. All right, just gonna come in
Ooh.
with the Ragavan, block and a
And
rebirth.
they were rebirthing the Ragavan. I think that's an Undying Evil.
Sure.
So it gets a +1/+1 counter. Or
Even more
some
dangerous.
some, equivalent of Undying Evil.
What's the lemur index value of a 3/2 Ragavan? I don't know if that's worth any more than a 2/1 Ragavan.
I think they're equally expensive. You just like put a hat on the lemur, basically.
Oh, okay. So it's a little cuter at least.
And here's a Solitude from Francisco. Last card
It
in hand.
really good top deck to be able to make that land drop, have the solitude.
And,
But Sam just
uh,
still has resources. Is that a
I actually do not know what card that is.
that is Sam is drawing some cards here.
Is that a Night's Whisper? Like a
That
really
might be,
fancy Night's Whisper?
yeah, that might be a Night's Whisper. All right, all right. Good call.
Yes, it is Night's Whisper. Night Feeder's Visitation.
Okay.
It's from a Secret Lair drop.
I think I can be forgiven for not immediately recognizing that one. So Francisco is going to really need to draw one of his power cards from here, something to just claw card advantage back. Expressive Iteration would be a very good card to draw. Omnath, anything along those lines. Without that, I think just like matching draw step for draw step with this Ragavan, as soon as Sam draws some way to get that Solitude out of the way, or if he has some way to get that Solitude out of the way, he did cast a Night Feeder's Visitation to get deeper in his deck. Looks like maybe just another.
Yeah, we're just putting like hats back on the Ragavan, just attacking into Solitude and getting it back with a rebirth spell.
Those are a lot worse for Sam than just a straight up removal spell.
Okay, so in response to Prismatic Ending, a Malakir rebirth, and
And
then
then a
bolting the
lightning.
Ragavan.
Interesting.
So that will put Ragavan back in play. Sam loses a couple life, but it's still on the battlefield.
Sam had so many rebirth effects that he chose to use them to get through Francisco's blockers rather than removal spells, which would allow him to get a Ragavan trigger. Just because he didn't, he was just trying to turn these rebirths into cards. And when your game gets into this state where you're not evoking elementals,
Uh-oh.
they have less functionality. But here is an expressive iteration from Francisco, just what he's been
Yeah,
waiting for.
finally the card. Oh, looks like at least 2, maybe 3 lands off the top though.
One
Not what
is
he
a
wanted.
Castle Vantress.
Uh, yep. So Castle can provide some virtual card advantage, and it's not like Sam's clock is huge right now. Ragavan is very scary, especially since Sam is capable of casting an Omnath he flips over at the
Yep.
moment.
Yeah, can cast really anything he hits with these treasures. It's
Here's
just another
challenge number
chalice.
2. So Thoughtseize seizes
Prismatic
a
Vista
Prismatic
and a
Vista and a
Triumph.
Ragran Triumph. So just 2 life from Sam there. Uh, and here's just, crack in the treasures. Here's a Fury. You
Here's a
have no
6/3.
removal. We're going to put a clock in.
Yep.
So cycle the Triumph of turn from Francisco.
Now that does leave Sam with nothing in hand and, has used up all of his rebirths. This would be a great time for Francisco to draw a Supreme Verdict, for example. I don't know if that is a card that he runs any copies of.
He
Looks
currently
like,
has a Fire Ice in hand.
yeah, so that can be a gain 6 here.
So Thoughtseize. So even if you tap with Ice, the card that's drawn, if it's a non-land, will get taken by the Thoughtseize. So Francisco's choosing to fire the Ragavan instead to kind of mitigate that. And then reveals the land, Odawara. And Odawara bounces the Fury. Yep. Points out that you need to use Prismatic Vista.
A good catch, especially because using a fetch land here would put Francisco to 12, which is 6 plus 6 or 2 Fury attacks. Although, with that Ragavan dead and that Fury in hand, Sam is not that close to having Fury on the battlefield again.
Yeah. Still a land away after drawing a mountain for the turn. And some of these lands are Darkslick Shores and the like, so not guaranteed to come and play untapped. Not Darkslick Shores, the red black one, Black Clay Cliffs.
We know what you meant. I wasn't even going to correct you on that. Is that all? Tough to see what that was. My brain interpreted it as a lightning helix, but I know that's not what it is. Looks like top with the castle, which is not great news for Sam.
But at the same time, no threat was played with from Francisco, so this may be an end of turn solitude.
Yeah, I think that might be what that is.
No, we're just more castling. So that's a dress down. I
Right.
recognize that lack of art anywhere.
Yes. And we are drawing whatever that card that looks kind of like a lightning helix, but definitely isn't, is.
So there's a Thoughtseize. Maybe we'll get to see what it is now.
Yeah.
It looks like Francisco's lining up lands to do things in response. So here is a actual lightning helix.
I thought it might have been. I just thought I was crazy. And then a
A
Flash
subtlety.
Phantom monster.
Yeah.
Doing a
I don't
great
hate
job of.
lightning helix. People have been
No.
saying burn is getting better, and lightning helix is one of the better cards against burn.
Yeah, an ideal card to have in that matchup. Fable of the Mirror Breaker hitting the board for Sam here.
Not going to get a lot of mileage out of the chapter 2. Uh, well, I guess we'll have 2 cards available to rummage.
Yeah, and he is under a serious clock here. Subtlety having flying, taking only 3 turns to take him out here. Any spell here is going to be, yeah,
Ooh, yeah,
prismatic ending on
prismatic
the
ending on the
Fable.
Fable.
But now he does have that
Well, there's
Fury in hand,
Fury.
though.
Fury is active, so here
So
is
I don't.
5 mana plus Fury. We'll take down the. Yep.
Yeah, I'm questioning that prismatic ending on the Fable a little bit, rather than the Goblin guarantees that Fury gets cast next turn. The Fable, at least, like Sam could miss at it, like draw a Black Cleave Cliffs or something like that, and it could be a little tougher, while not also getting gas. But the enchantment is very scary, so I understand the impetus to do that. But looks
So,
like casting these elementals is really just gonna get Sam there now. Turn things
yeah.
around with a Fury and a Grief, and not a lot that Francisco can do here.
Grief reveals a fetch land, and Sam attacks him down to 5 life. There's a Solitude on top, which can clean up some of the board. You can exile the Fury and block the Shaman,
Mm.
but the Grief still gets through. But that's better than most of your draws, so Francisco's likely going to take it.
Yep. That grief having menace means a lot of things that could potentially answer it are just not going to.
Yeah. I mean, there's always the potential Francisco will eventually draw an Omnath after getting to stabilize the board a little here. If Sam has Lightning Bolt, it's over. But if Francisco can just get a couple turns where he can gain life off Omnath and give him more time to draw into more of his value plan, he has a way to get into this game. He just needs to make sure he can make it through this turn, essentially.
Yeah. And he's probably going to make it through this turn, but he does need the top of his deck to really cooperate with him after that.
So Solitude comes out, exiles Fury, and should block the Shaman.
Well, yes, if it doesn't do that, then Francisco dies, so I would recommend the block. Takes effectively no damage that turn, and
Okay,
it was
Fury
a
on
Fury on
top.
top. All right. And we see the power of these elementals. Like, yes, a ton of their what you think about with these elementals is tied up in that evoke cost, being able to be answers for things, be very efficient early in the game, keep you from getting run over by fast modern draws. But once you get to this point in the game, a lot of it just gets decided by who draws more of their Shriek Maws. And you see these cards have just gone back and forth killing each other. And whatever you're left at the end of the day, whoever still has something is going to be able to ride that to a huge advantage.
Yeah,
Everybody's about 1 or 2 Fury attacks away from death at any point.
these kind of matchups in Modern, when they get down to this point, are really just upscaled limited games. You just grind down to low resources, and if nothing fancy is going on, whoever 2-for-1's most is going to win. That's just how Magic kind of works.
Yeah, and Fury's really good at that. Just takes whatever random bodies they have left off the board and then leaves a huge threat. So it looks very bad for Sam, where a second ago it looked very bad for Francisco.
The card, and these are treasure tokens down here on Sam's board. 5 lands and 2 treasure tokens. So he has access to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana.
And that Castle Ardenvale, not easy to fit into your 4-color mana base that has Blood Moon in the main deck, so you have to have the basics to enable that. But doing quite a bit of work this game.
Castle Vantress, you mean, yeah.
Castle Vantress, yeah.
I was curious if you had seen a Castle Ardenvale as
No,
well.
I can't imagine that Castle Ardenvale has also been fit into this mana base. But I guess stranger things have happened.
So I think Sam's hand is just 2 lands. So this Fury attack can bring Sam down to a precipitous 2 life. Francisco's going to Castle Vantress on his upkeep, I believe.
Now that is a Hive of the Eye Tyrant in play for Sam here. So if he draws, he has the mana to activate that and attack and play a Kolaghan's Command, and that would be lethal. I don't know if he has any Lightning Bolts in, but that would also do it here. Unless
So
Francisco...
funny little moment there. Francisco upkeep Castle Vantress's, goes, top, bottom, and then attacks with Fury, and Sam's like, you need to draw a card for your turn. Okay, so here's Kroxa. Gets an expressive iteration, which is a huge win for Sam here. And then we're rebuying the Kroxa immediately to deal 3 damage. So Kroxa does trade with Fury if allowed to block. So Sam kind of has to fade an ice, a fire, something from that effect from Francisco. Because we're on empty here.
Yeah, and Sam has enough resources in his graveyard that just killing this Kroxa is going to be pretty close to just dealing lethal right back to Francisco. Castle Vantress again, though. What can we hit here? Can we find a prismatic ending? Can we find an ice? How much mana do we have? I don't think Solitude will do it.
No, Solitude's not going to do it. Teferi works as well.
Teferi works.
So land,
Bottom
mystery
both.
card. Looks like they're both bottoming. Okay, Sam's excited. Knows he's not dead.
These are the moments we live for. What is it? Just show it. Is
Teferi?
it a Teferi?
It's Teferi.
It's a Teferi.
Oh,
okay.
So that bounces Kroxa, and then Fury comes in for the win. So good one on Francisco there.
All right, so we got a game 3. That's exciting.
Yeah, as excited as Sam was for that your top deck, it felt like a game 3 moment, but this is just, going to game 3 now.
I mean, you get your thrills where you can. It doesn't have to be game 3 for that flip in the top card to be a big deal. And beating Sam Rolfe in a game in the top 32 of a tournament where you're playing for a, beta booster draft, there's a lot on the line. There's a lot to be gained by flipping that Teferi off the top of your deck here. So that's got to feel pretty good. We do have one more game left. Francisco is going to be on the draw, which means that he is not going to have Veil of Summer up for, turn one, either Thoughtseize or a what he's really hoping doesn't get hit by a Grief Malakir Rebirth combo.
Yeah, another small thing I caught there. Sam tried to abscond away with the Chalice of the Void that he played last game off Ragavan. Realized it and gave it back. Definitely do not want to have a Chalice, your opponent's Chalice in your deck when you go into the third game
No,
if you're playing for such stakes.
that's pretty bad for both players there. We've been playing so much Magic Online, and Sam, a huge Magic Online grinder, has played effectively infinite number of matches on Moto, but has also played a pretty significant amount of paper. But it's easy to lose track of those little things when that's not what you've been focusing on.
Yeah, really easy. And to kind of recap the tournament for anyone who's joining or didn't get to watch yesterday, this is the championship. This is a modern event that happens all weekend. We're in the top 32 right now. It's single elimination. Going to the top 16, that's also single elimination. Then the top 8 drafts beta. That's the prize. You get to get your 3 packs of limited edition beta and draft it.
And really just hope to open something in there.
Yeah, really, you're just opening packs of beta, and that's your prize. Kind of the punishment is playing out the beta games of limited, but you're there for the chance of opening a Lotus or a Recall or something like that. Shivan Dragon.
Yes, and we will hopefully be able to bring you coverage of at least the draft and see what these players open and got to win in the tournament. Looks like we are not able to finish that match out, so we're gonna watch this match between Chaz Hinckley and Russell Salerno. We've got a wooded foothills on one side, some bubbling going on. Okay, that may be the B camera. So we're back with our
The backup
4 color
match.
control Rakdos Scam.
We got to make sure everyone knows that this is paper magic, and not only are there tons of people around, you also just have to shuffle. You got to spend time shuffling.
It
That's
takes
just
a
how
minute.
paper magic works. Actually, I've been really appreciating how Francisco has been shuffling. He's been, doing it pretty thoroughly, even with fetch lands. Something people often overlook. Just like to get the games done quicker, just shuffle twice and present.
Well, and that's the classic like paper player starts playing Magic Online or Magic Arena and then becomes a shuffler truther because their deck is actually fully randomized and is not showing up cards in quite the combinations that they're used to when they just do those like quick cut and shuffles that don't fully randomize your deck.
But do let you get games in.
They
That's
do let you get
yeah.
games in.
I've been enjoying this Recto scam deck. I know we call it scam because that's just kind of caught on, but it really feels like how everyone was calling the Underworld Breach deck a C tier deck from Minguchi's tweet.
Hmm.
It's not really a scam anymore. People know about it, and it's like quite good. But you gotta celebrate history there.
Yeah, the whole point of the deck is that yes, you have the ability to scam them, but almost all of the cards in your deck are very good modern cards. The only like real costs are that some of your lands are Malakir Rebirths, and then you have a couple of copies of the other Malakir Rebirth that isn't a land that I can never remember the name of. That not an ideal Magic card, but we did see Sam make use of them, turn them into cards, although he had to make plays that were not optimal in order to do that. But then the rest of the deck is, Ragavans and Furies and Griefs and Thoughtseizes and removal spells, and there's nothing wrong with those Magic cards.
So there's two other ones. There's Undying Evil and Undying Malice.
That's probably
They're
why I
the
don't
same. They're
remember.
named the same. Undying Evil gives Undying the mechanic, so it
Okay,
doesn't work with the other ones. The Undying Malice, which just gives a +1/+1 counter.
gotcha.
because you obviously you can't Undying a card with +1/+1 counter on it. All right, players looking at their opening hands now. We do have Sam being on the play here after losing that last game, and I see the Knight's Whisper that we were confused about the previous game.
Yeah, this seems like the matchup for that sort of card.
All right, and here's a classic.
Yep. The turn one
Here's my
Ragavan.
Ragavan.
And, you know, that also leaves Francisco kind of unable to leave up Veil of Summer for any sort of discard shenanigans that Sam is going to get up to, because he's really got to deal with this Ragavan right now. You don't want to. Those turn two Ragavan hits tend to cascade and make the game kind of untenable. So if you've got a Prismatic Ending or any other one mana removal spell, you have to cast it here.
I imagine the Plains is going to forecast this Prismatic Ending. We just haven't got quite in there yet.
Fetching the basic on turn one on your main phase generally means the spell is being
Oh,
cast.
we found a torn sleeve. We must
Oh
replace
man,
it.
Paper Magic striking again.
Lots of sleeves in that sleeve too. This is not a single sleeve endeavor. This is a multiple sleeve problem with a multiple sleeve solution.
We're gonna take a minute to do a little field surgery, get that sleeve back on that card, which was
Yeah,
a
you got to make
subtlety I
sure
learned.
everyone's taken care of.
You have to let your cards know that you respect them so that they can show up when you need them.
Notably, all Sam knows is that it's not a Fable of Mirrorbreaker. All right. Typically, I'm a fan of just, putting a prismatic ending on the table and then shuffling
Yeah,
just to.
not the most efficient way of doing all of this, but we're getting there.
Yeah. So there's the prismatic ending finally, which exiles the Ragavan. Going back to Sam's turn now. Uh, I don't see any lands from Sam here. Got one. Hive of the Eye Tyrant. It's a good one. This is just. Yep,
Yeah,
Dauthi Voidwalker.
Dauthi Voidwalker. We got a 3/2 in play. Not one of the matchups where Dauthi Voidwalker, the range and quality of a Dauthi Voidwalker on turn two is massive. There are matchups where it represents just an existential threat to your opponent. When you're playing against a deck like Living End or other graveyard-based decks, it can be a horrific card to play against. Against just a value-based mid-range control deck that has Omnaths and expressive iterations as its quote unquote engines, the Dauthi Voidwalker is a lot of a 3/2 that maybe casts a spell at some point.
Yeah, but it is pretty nice when you cash it in for the like an expressive iteration or even a lightning helix sometimes,
Mhm.
because we do know Francisco has that available to him.
Yeah, and if your opponent's at 3 and you get to cash it in for that, you know, then I have to eat all of my words and it becomes the best card you could possibly have.
So I believe that Fire and Ice is also exiled with Dauthi Voidwalker because it's a damage-based removal spell. Those
That is
resolve,
correct.
and then state-based effects clean up the creature. So Fire and Ice should be exiled with a void counter on it. Is that what the counter is? A shadow counter? A silver
Uh,
counter?
it is not a silver counter. Dauthi Voidwalker, not a version of Karn, but some sort of shadow counter.
It's a void counter.
A void
Confirmed.
counter. Okay. That's more flavorful. I'm game for that. It
Yep.
already
And Judges
has
just
shadow.
confirmed that the Fire and Ice does go in exile with a void counter on it.
Francisco, I don't believe has any graveyard relevant things. His Traverse, the Uvenwald, I don't believe is being turned off by those cards failing to be in the graveyard or anything like that.
If there's even a service at all, we watched 2 games now, and we've seen nary a Mistress Bauble.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't believe he's running Traverse, so I don't think there's a real effect here to those cards not being in his graveyard.
My favorite response to cards in hand is just spreading out all your cards in hand. Got this many, 5.
I'm too nervous to count these cards. You can do it. And Fable on the play. It's been a good curve of threats. Just Ragavan into Voidwalker into Fable. Francisco has done a good job of answering them at mana parity each time. Prismatic Ending on the Ragavan, Fire on the Dothi Voidwalker. But then this Fable of the Mirror Breaker is putting 2 threatening permanents into play. You really want to answer this one with a counterspell or something that Francisco really doesn't have available to him the way that this deck is built. Is going to need to answer both of these somehow.
Teferi is a good answer though. That takes care of the token, and then the Fable can be dealt with at a later time. But you do get to draw the card.
And continuing to keep Sam off of getting additional treasure tokens, additional mana off of treasure tokens that would let him do things like, if that Ragavan had gotten a treasure token hit in, then Sam could hard cast a Fury this turn that takes out that Teferi. That's not quite happening here.
It looks like we are discarding to Fable of the Mirror Breakers, Chapter 2, a Kroxa and a Thoughtseize, drawing a Fury and something else. Think a Thoughtseize.
And if there's a fetch land in Sam's hand, then he would be able to cast that Kroxa from the graveyard this turn if he wants.
I think Sam may probably want to Thoughtseize before trying to do that. I believe
Sure.
there is one in his hand. Just to see if the way is clear. Kroxa is always going to be a 2-for-1, but you do get rid of a lot of your graveyard by doing that. And Seasoned Pyromancer, which we see here, does produce multiple types of threats for Francisco to deal with. But Francisco's just going to subtlety it, pitching a blue card that I can't quite make out.
Yeah, just get that tempo. Definitely going down on cards here. Subtlety is really at its best when it's getting another elemental incarnation. So yes, you are trading 2 cards, but you are trading 2 cards with 2 of your opponent's cards. Here, you're getting, your opponent's mana. But now, Francisco passing the turn after plussing, all of his sorceries are now instants here. That Fable does transform, is becoming a real threat, but as long as Francisco has some stuff to spend his mana on here, he should be able to keep up, hopefully.
So Thoughtseize from Sam, and in response, we get a subtlety that does not target Thoughtseize, but just gets out of hand now. Reveals a hand with Express Federation and Prismatic Ending.
Interesting. I don't know about this whole sequence here, honestly. I'm not confident that Francisco has left himself with the tools to be ahead, especially against this Fable of the Mirror Breaker flipped here.
I'm curious if Sam would have even taken Subtlety, because you can Teferi plus this turn, right? So Francisco does have the option to cast either of those sorceries on Sam's
Right.
turn.
Right.
Though
Looks like that
I
Night's
believe
Whisper.
the way Express Federation is wording, it doesn't work that well on your opponent's turn.
No, that's true. It doesn't. You certainly can't exile a land and play it with your end of turn expressive iteration.
So Sam chose to take the Prismatic Ending out of Francisco's hand, so Francisco immediately casts Express Federation. Sam may be trying to set up some sort of reflection plays with the Seasoned Pyromancer that we know is in his hand.
Yeah, and I think that is that's goal number 1 for Francisco here. That's his short-term task that he needs to accomplish, is not let Sam set up some combination of that reflection of Kiki Jiki and a creature that he can get value off of copying with it. So it looks like we're going to go ahead and just subtlety or solitude right now to keep that from happening. Sadly, exiling a lightning helix to do it because he doesn't have the additional red mana to just, kill that with a lightning helix, and has spent a lot of time and energy dealing with this Fable of the Mirror Breaker.
Yeah, but it's important though, not only because of what the Fable plus Pyromancer represents on its face, the token spam, but also because it allows Sam to just fill up his graveyard so that Kroxa has to be dealt with multiple times.
Yeah. And I mean, Francisco is hoping to exile that Kroxa when he gets a chance to, but Sam doing a good job thought seizing that prismatic ending out of his hand, trying to protect it and use it as kind of a long-term engine.
Yeah, so now Francisco's not in the driver's seat, but both players are very low on resources, and Francisco does have a Teferi and a Solitude in play to Sam's nothing.
Sam does have access to that Seasoned Pyromancer, though, unless he bottomed it. I may be confused about what
I,
happened with that
I, I
card.
believe he put it on top.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like a 0 mana engineered explosives that can clear tokens out. And I think Francisco's plan here is he's really hoping to just ride this subtlety for 3 more attacks and just kind of contain things as best he can until that. Uh, but Sam really, as long as he draws a removal spell such as this
That's a
Fury, is
pretty good
gonna,
removal spell.
yeah,
It kills the
gonna
solid.
stop that plan.
Yeah, it kills the subtlety and takes down the Teferi too, so that you can't bounce another card. And the hand is clear now, so Season Pyromancer just comes down and draws 2 cards. No discards required.
And Francisco left with kind of nothing. The Teferi down to 2 loyalty because that last point of damage from the Fury was able to go to it to keep it from minusing, and just not really gonna have too much to put together unless he hits like another expressive iteration or something like that on his draw step. And that
Yeah, we'll
Kroxa
see.
in Samarov's graveyard really looming there now.
This is an important draw step for Francisco because you do not want Sam to have a single turn where he can pull ahead. And it looks like that's a land, Sacred Foundry, if I don't miss my guess.
Yeah, we could use that a while ago when we were casting a Lightning Helix.
I think Francisco's trying to figure out if he can cast Omnath with his current mana, but I don't think he can. I think this is also just a straight up Jeskai. I haven't seen a real green source.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And we have not seen an Omnath get cast at any point, have we? So Omnath, I think, has lost a significant amount of the oomph that really made it that kind of groan testing card when your opponent cast it, because having Yorion is just that big mana sink. So when you do have an Omnath and then you fetch, and then you add all that mana to your pool, you can actually do something powerful with it when you had access to Yorion. That's actually a lot less true now. And yeah, another thing, we haven't seen Francisco cast a Renin 6 in any of these games, so I think you're right. This is just Jeskai control.
So Season Pyromancer attacked Teferi down to 1, and Rogvan attacked Francisco in order to get the trigger. So that's a treasure token and a flipped card. It ends up being a Flutter Strand, so Sam can't cast that. But you gotta make sure you get your treasure token. You're not allowed to forget that if you flip the card over.
Yeah, you have to resolve the whole ability.
There we go. Nice little Bob Ross. And here comes the post-combat Kroxa, discarding the Kihira that Sam knew about. Which is why there was no need to do that pre-combat.
Yeah.
No tricks. It was all face up.
And with that relatively limited amount of mana available to Francisco here, this is going to be very, very hard to come back from. I'm not really sure what he could even draw. I mean, that's a good start, but
I
even
don't think
then,
it is. It requires too much mana, and you really want to draw like kind of a Teferi into something
mhm.
so that you at least have a shot of drawing a second card.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think that he has the mana to leverage this in a meaningful way.
Like this Fire and Ice on Francisco's turn. Whoa, whoa, whoa. One of those goes to the bottom, right? We need to put a card on the bottom for Express Federation. Did we
Yes.
do that?
I think he may still be deciding on this expressive iteration. Well,
No.
okay, hold on.
I'm pretty sure you can't draw 3 cards on Express
No,
Federation.
that would be too good.
A little bit of a mistake here from our players. Uh, Top deck Express Federation into Scalding Tarn, Fire and Ice, and the card in his hand. One of those needs to be on the bottom.
Yeah.
Unless I missed something, which is possible.
I don't think so. He only had the one card in hand that he discarded to the Kroxa, and it was that key here. I don't believe there was anything else. So I think that we have an additional card in play here that should not be. But I could be mistaken. Lot on the line for the players here. So this is a super tense match. You know, each match win gets you one step closer to playing a beta draft. Each loss, a loss kicks you out of the tournament. You don't get to do that.
Are we tapping Kroxa with ice?
I'm not sure what's going on here.
I think someone is pointing out the extra cards thing now. Oh, we're tapping with ice so that we can try to draw a white card for Solitude because Francisco has not realized of the
That
extra
he's
card.
accidentally drawn
Yeah.
3, yeah.
And it was a Scalding Tarn, so we've actually already shuffled the deck and gotten a land.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Because
committed to having chosen Fire and Ice Exiled Scalding Tarn in hand.
so I think that's what currently is happening with the judge calls here. Trying to figure out what happened, what's going on, how to fix it, that sort of deal.
Yeah.
One of the lovely parts, well, maybe not lovely, because playing in Magic Online, for instance, this just wouldn't happen. It's all automated. But in paper, the judges are there to resolve these disputes. So we're just gonna kind of wait around to see what the result of that is. I believe I have a very limited judging experience, but I think after you've exiled a card and played a card, the other one should be bottomed, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty easy fix to the situation where 2 cards have clearly been committed to, and you can't come back from that commitment to those cards, so you would
It's
just
honestly not even certain to me that Scalding Tarn was even important as part of the play.
Oh,
Because
no, I don't think it was.
if you just keep Fire and Ice in hand or Fire Ice exiled and Solitude in hand, you could just try to ice into a white card and then cast the Solitude, and Scalding Tarn is not involved in that.
Right, right. The Scalding Tarn is not necessary to what is happening here.
Got quite the crowd here as we're trying to figure out basically this express variation thing. All right, looks like we've got the judge coming in to give the talk.
And we'll update if we get any insight into, what has happened here, what the fix is or anything like that.
Yeah,
But I
we're
think
just kind of along for the ride with everyone else. We don't know what's going on. It seems pretty clear what happened, at least from my perspective, because I noticed it while it was happening, right?
Mhm.
But when you're just in the moment, it is hard to know what happened. You do have to backtrack quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, I definitely like one of the weakest parts of my like magic knowledge is I know the rules of the game. I know what you got to do. I don't know exactly what the fix is for each and every situation where something has gone wrong. But I just rely on the judges for that one since you got to call them over anyways when something has gone wrong.
That's what they're there for. I mean, this is top 32 in a very high stakes thing. You're gonna be sloppy and make mistakes, especially when you're under the gun like that.
Yeah, I think it's a really tough situation. I have definitely made, these sort of uh, you know, just technical mistakes, whatever, like physical errors, because my mind has been focused on other things. I think that it is pretty clear that there wasn't an intent to cheat here because number one, I don't think that Scalding Tarn contributed in any way to the play that Francisco is trying to make, and number two, this is a really easy one to catch. Like once your opponent realizes, wait, you exile the card, you played a land, and now you're casting a spell. Like that's too many cards. Like that, you're just going to get caught for that. I don't think there's any reason to believe that there was ill intent here.
We're gesticulating a lot between Scalding Tarn and Solitude. I think we're trying to find a fix that Francisco's happy with, or explaining how things could be different or something to that effect.
Yeah.
One of the weird parts about starting to play the game after you've made a mistake is that you kind of have to unwind everything that happened afterwards. And every time you shuffle or search your deck, it gets harder and harder.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't go back past a search your library for a land and shuffle it. Like you're kind of locked into whatever decisions would have let you get there.
I remember once playing a tournament where we rewound 4 turns consecutively.
Yeah, I don't think you. That's a lot of turns.
So we actually did do it to satisfaction to both players, but the judge that oversaw that, I learned afterwards that one of the head judges in the in the event just would not have wanted that to happen because it would have
Yeah.
taken too long. And it did. We had like a 25-minute extension. But the game luckily ended in normal time without the extension being necessary.
Yeah, that's pretty fortunate. The time that it takes to rewind a game that way, and also just the judge call to like make that happen and figure out that that's the plan. That sounds really significant to me. Probably not something that makes a lot of sense for tournament logistics generally.
I'm surprised this is such an involved judge call. Maybe it's because we were both paying attention from an outside perspective, so it's clearer to us what had happened. Whereas both of these players are just playing the game and thinking about a million other things.
Hmm.
So they have to kind of figure out what's going on and then what went wrong.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe the fix just isn't as clear as we would think. Again, this is not my area of expertise, and I don't know exactly how you put this game state back together.
The only thing that is clear is that Francisco did make a mistake and resolved expressive iteration incorrectly. That's the only thing I know for certain.
And
All right.
and for the rest, we'll give you all the information once we have it.
So it looks like the judge is coaching him into shuffling the island back into his deck. That was the
Okay,
island he grabbed off of Scalding Tarn. I think we're reassembling it to where the expressive variation is just looking at 3 cards now.
interesting. Okay.
Because the island is back. Sam's shuffling the deck. And
They
then
could
we're
also just be shuffling the Solitude back in, because if he had chosen
w-
Fire and Ice and Scalding Tarn, I don't know where
yes,
that
I
Solitude is
that
right
could
now.
be happening, but I believe I specifically saw the island.
Okay.
Because now
I mean,
only
I guess
there's
the
fewer
island would
lands
be
in
in
play
play
now.
if we're committing to that. So yeah, you're right. You're right.
So for anyone who is tuning in, Francisco resolved an expressive iteration incorrectly. Uh, Looked at 3 cards, exiled a Fire and Ice, then played a Scalding Tarn from hand with the other cards still in hand, and then just kept it there. So what is happening now is the estimation of resolving expressive iteration correctly, and it looks like the extra card, the Scalding Tarn, did go to the bottom, and Francisco has Solitude plus Mystery card after using Ice on Croxa during his main phase. So that's where we are now.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
then did not draw a white card, so loses. Yeah, so that's kind of ending with somewhere between a bang and a whimper on that one. It was
Well,
an
I think
exciting,
given
yeah,
given the whole judge call, that can really only be a whimper to miss on that top deck.
yeah, for sure. It's just that you're gearing up so far, and then bam.
That's interesting. I mean, I have no idea what the policies are around rewinding and card choices with stuff like expressive iteration. Um, clearly he clearly he didn't mean to, take that Scalding Tarn as the third card. That's not something that he would want in that situation, revealing Fire and Ice and Solitude. Those are the two he would want. Looks like we're gonna take a little bit of a break and hopefully be back soon with the top 16.
Yeah, we'll Go to a match.
Great.
All right, welcome back, everyone.
Hello.
Looks
Welcome back.
looks like we've got a little Rakdos scam action.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm,
Uh,
I'm excited to see this. Okay, okay.
yeah,
Looks
yeah,
like it's Jeskai Breach.
yeah. So Chaz Hinkle on Jeskai Breach and Bert JP on Mystery Deck. We don't know yet.
We'll find out shortly. I'm excited to see. Jeskai Breach in general has taken over Modern in a pretty real way. The C tier combo deck of the format, but has managed to pick up a lot of results for being such a low tier deck.
So if we can go to the game camera, we'll get there in a little bit. We're a little frantic this evening. So here we go. So Bert's starting off with a Spiral of Canal into a Ragavan. So this may be Murktide or Breach. The way the hand looks, I'm
There's an
leaning
Unholy
towards
Heat and a
Murktide.
Dress Down in Bert's hand, so that's feeling pretty Murktide to me.
Then when sacrificing an Arid Mesa, I believe that one is, for a... Is that one of the new Steam events from the
That
Infinity
is,
set?
I believe that is a Space Steam Vents.
Uh,
So Bert putting one of the classic tests of current modern onto Chaz here by starting with that turn one Ragavan on the play. Chaz fetching main phase, which is, often an indication of the removal spell for the Ragavan, but that is the number one thing he's going to have to do here.
yeah,
If it's just a
or
Ragavan to
another
block, though,
Ragavan.
that's a sign of weakness.
Yeah, one of the best starts Murktide ever has is Ragavan into your opponent not dealing with it. Because they have so many ways to just keep the tempo once they have it. And we see Bert here just, unholy heating the Ragavan, coming in, crashing in with his Ragavan. Now has, I think that's a 7th edition foil counterspell in hand that he
Lovely.
is leaving up this turn with the treasure token.
Those 7th edition foil cards are not cheap cards for any of the playable ones.
Yeah, so it looks like we've got Charizard here representing a treasure token.
Ragavan flipping a land in Urza Saga, but nothing useful here. I mean, one of the things about the Breach deck is even a decent number of the spells are not the most impressive thing in the world. Flipping a grinding station is not going to get you too far as is it Murktide, but a bunch of the colored spells are still pretty powerful to hit. So Chaz is not going to want to take too many hits off of this Ragavan. Primarily for the treasures, but anytime that a spell gets hit that is useful, that is
So,
just this kind of cascading card advantage engine that gets really tough to come back from.
so Chaz cast an Imri there, which beats the counterspell. Uh, Interestingly, chooses not to play the Springleaf Drum out of hand first, which would also reduce the cost of Emery by one. I'm not sure the reasoning for that, actually. Maybe trying
Yeah,
to
I
keep
don't.
it for a leisure shredder, perhaps.
Yeah, it could be. Although playing out that Mishra's Bauble, I think, is a little inconsistent with that set of concepts.
Yeah. So Ragavan hits and reveals an unholy heat off the top. Chess has no creatures in place that's unlikely to be cast. Though it wouldn't be the first time today we've seen someone kill their own Ragavan.
Yeah, this doesn't quite seem like the spot for it, I gotta say. So 2 lands and a treasure token in play for Bert. We don't know if he has a third land drop ready to go. Looks like there's an island in hand.
There is an island. I'm trying to see what the other cards in the hand are. I know there's a dress down. The other ones are a little closer, harder to get a read on.
Oh, this is a very miscut island over there. Bert, I believe, has probably built this deck up over a period of time and really invested in it. You love to see it.
Consider coming out for Bert. So getting that surveil in, blue to Delta to the graveyard. Now we can call it surveil because it's been eroded as such.
It is Surveil. It triggers your uh, disinformation campaign. You
Yeah,
can
that's the
you
one.
can put that together.
I don't think Bert probably has a nice foily disinformation campaign though, so that probably didn't make the cut here.
No, and that's probably the only reason.
So Bert thinking a little bit. I can't quite make out the non-dress down card in his hand. Uh, if he has a Murktide region, I think he's still 1 mana short from casting it. Um, now
Oh,
now if he has
Bobble
a
would
Murktide
allow
region,
him to
it's
cast it.
online. But it is nice to get a clock on just to pressure the breach player before they can assemble their combo, and then you can spend the rest of your draw steps like keeping up interaction.
Absolutely. And one of the things that like this natural this curve of, land into turn 2 Urza Saga naturally wants to do is start making a construct starting on turn 3. If you can put your opponent behind the 8 ball enough that that's just not a play that they can afford to make, then you are denying them some of the resources that their cards are capable of contributing.
So Bert chooses not to play the card that we think is Murktide Regent. Goes to draw the Mishra's Bauble card.
That is definitely a Murktide Regent, yep. Not the card that he drew, but he definitely has a Murktide Regent in his hand.
So maybe chose to leave open mana for the card on top of his library because I don't think this is the turn where Dress Down is going to be active.
No, probably not.
Now he uses the same play that I thought should have been played last turn: Springleaf Drum into Emery.
And this Emery does resolve.
Oh, and Ben's another Emery and an Unholy Heat, a Prismatic Ending, and I think that's a Ledger Shredder. So no artifacts in the graveyard for Chaz.
And that dress down could have been used to stop that mill from happening, but Bert gonna save it can have a lot more application versus construct tokens. Although now with Chaz missing a land drop, construct tokens don't seem super likely to be relevant at least for the next several turns.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind about the Jeskai Breach combo is that it wins with Thassa's Oracle very commonly, so that does get turned off by Dress Down.
Yeah, that's true. If you're not a grape shot gamer like some people are, then yeah, Thassa's Oracle just gets countered by Dress Down. It can be a significant problem for the Breach deck, especially in game 1.
So an attack with Ragavan comes over, and in response, Chaz looks at the top card of his library with Mishra's Bauble before choosing whether or not to block with Emery. There's an Underworld Breach in Chaz's hand, and I think he's just taking the damage from Ragavan here. Yep, there's another. Don't have another Pokemon card, just a blank foil.
Oh, that's a hit.
Yeah, Express Federation off the Ragavan is a nice one. I think there's a Ledger Shredder in hand, so Bert could go Ledger Shredder Express Federation.
It would cost him at least one of his treasure tokens to do that, and I think he is hoping to hit a 1 mana removal spell anyways off of this expressive iteration. So Ledger Shredder cast first would give him another shot at that to take that Emery off of the board.
Yeah, Emery is not. Emery's a great card, but I don't know that I would. Yeah, okay. So it looks like we're just casting the Express Federation. Like it is worth one card every turn,
Mhm,
which is a lot of cardboard for the Breach player. But when they're behind on mana like they are right now,
mhm.
it's not. I think you could afford to give them a turn with it, but
Yeah, I mean, the thing that is my main consideration there really is that I believe that is a Mox Amber in the graveyard now. So that does represent an additional mana, which is what Chaz is really constricted on.
okay. So here's another island from Bert, uh, and it looks like can't quite see what's added to hand. I think it's another Expressive iteration.
So cards for days here
And second spell for the turn, Ledger
is the
Shredder.
Legislature. That always feels a little medium when that happens.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, no, can't quite cast the Murktide with only 5 cards in graveyard.
Yeah, and I would have been pretty interested in getting a Murktide into play here with uh what 3 +1/+1 counters on it or something like that. Um,
Ooh, and we're going to cash the treasure tokens in for the second Ledger Shredder. I actually
interesting.
don't mind this play. I think it's pretty good. When Bert has no interaction or only dressed down as interaction,
Mhm.
and it's unlikely Chess is going to be able to have enough cards and mana to combo you this turn. I think just trying to get out pressure is going to be the name of the game.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. This Urza Saga is going away this turn. Chaz is going to be pretty pinched on mana from here.
So it will likely generate its colorless mana. I don't think a construct does very much to this
No.
particular board state. I think Chaz's best, like with a breach in hand, Chaz's best fail state turn is likely going to be breach and casting bobble a bunch of times,
Mhm.
uh, just to get a bunch of cards to play with Bert's. From this turn off, only playing interaction,
Yeah.
basically.
Although, depending on, I don't know, like Chaz could win the game from here, right? If everything just lines up
Yes.
perfectly.
I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 mana. If there is a grinding station
Mhm.
somewhere, this could be a game.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the grinding station yet, but it
But
could exist.
but that's just it. If there is a grinding station and a breach in his hand.
Like that's why I don't mind Bert going for it. Like you can lose here, but the number of cards and mana that Chaz had access to would make it unlikely.
I mean, the only thing that he didn't know about is like Chaz would just need to have breach grinding station in his hand, and he hadn't made a land drop in several turns. Um, I don't know. I think this is a
So
tough one to
here's
have
Breach.
left
I don't
shields
see a
down for.
grinding station in Bert's hand or in Chaz's hand, so
Sure.
or
Okay.
graveyard.
Well, and that's just what Bert's hoping now.
So here is 2 mana for no what sorry, 1 mana for Ragavan. Gonna exile 3 cards for that.
And that's gonna allow his Mox Ambers to make red mana, so he
You can unholy heat one of
should be
the
able to.
birds down.
Right.
And then cash in your last 3 cards in the graveyard for another card off of Mishra's Bauble.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we do get to do some conniving off of the Ledger Shredders, thanks to the wording of Ledger Shredder.
Yeah, and this is just the power of Unholy Heat, though. The ability to just manufacture cards out of nowhere, and the cards that you need, you know.
Was that actually the third spell? Didn't we have a Breach Amber Ragavan?
Yeah, I believe we did.
So we maybe missed the triggers, but it's maybe there's some verbal thing we didn't hear.
Yeah, that's Paper Magic is a little messy sometimes for that. Ledger Shredder, a tough one in Paper Magic, just kind of design wise. The triggering off of both player spells on both turns. It's really easy to mess that up. The first
Amber
amp
was off Saga.
was
That's
off
right.
of the Urza Saga, so I guess this is just the second spell. Yeah.
All right, so here's Emery number 2 being escaped, which is card neutral or card positive, actually, because of the exile of 4 cards to mill for. Yeah, uh, didn't hit a grinding station off of this. Mostly a bunch of fetch lands. Is that a lightning bolt or is that a different archive card?
I think that is a lightning bolt. I can't really imagine what else it would be.
So playing the other Amber. So you can do this Amber Emery thing for a couple times, but you are not making a lot of headway in doing so.
Yeah, just being this constricted on mana does limit his options a lot.
And yet he's still casting his like fourth spell of the turn, fifth spell
Yeah.
of the turn.
I mean, a Mox and an Underworld Breach, you can leverage that. You can find some ways to do it. The double Moxes killing each other off, and you can do some amount of Emerying with Moxes here.
Right. I imagine Unholy Heat has Delirium. I can't quite make out the fourth card in the graveyard, but if I had to guess, I'd say it's an Urza Saga, just for Delirium purposes.
Mhm. There is an Urza Saga in the graveyard. We do know that. Or there should be. I guess
Yeah,
possible
it
that he
could have been
exiled the wrong
exiled.
card, but he is
Yeah,
in the top
so
16 of this tournament, so I assume that leaving the enchantment land in the graveyard was a priority.
Well, it looks like the graveyard is all cleaned out now to lightning bolt down one of these
Mm,
ledger shredders.
okay,
That did exile the Mishra's Bauble, so this Emery from here on out is going to be pretty just constrained on whatever Chaz finds off of his expressive iteration,
sure.
which actually makes Bert's removal extremely good because if Bert can clear the creatures off of Chaz's side of the battlefield, Chaz
Yep.
has just got 1 mana.
And Bert did not have any removal the last turn or so, but now looking at a lot of cards potentially.
I see a red card, though I think it's a Magus the Moon.
And I think, like, Bert would be happy with a block here from either of those creatures. That's a tough block for Chaz to make because of the possibility that a single removal spell would then cut him off of that Mox Amber
Nope, it's a
mana.
lightning bolt. So it looks like we're going to lightning bolt down the Imri and Connive Trigger. So kept the Spell Pierce off of the expressive iteration, so it does have that basically hard counter spell against non-creature spells.
Yeah, and gonna be tough to get kind of like punked out of the game now with a Spell Pierce up against an opponent on one land. I mean, there is, a Springleaf Drum and a Mox Amber on the other side, but still very constricted on mana.
So here comes Ragavan, but not Ledger Shredder. This is just in case Chaz doesn't trade, then Ledger Shredder can block the Ragavan, but Chaz chooses to trade.
And a tough spot for Chaz, very low resources here at the end of all of that.
Yeah, just 1 mana and a bunch of mana producing artifacts that need a legendary creature in play, but luckily draws a fetch land.
So what does Chaz's route out of this look like? What does he need to do here?
It's typically, you would just need to have a lot more time, and I don't. If we know Bert has a Murktide Regent in hand,
Hmm.
if Bert chooses to play that, you all of a sudden have very little time to develop your mana and your cards.
Right. And we see Chaz kind of playing this more defensive game because he's just trying to buy that time. Uh, Question of whether to spell pierce here or not. Bert
Oh
is
yeah,
going to go ahead.
absolutely. I think I would have pointed that Spell Pierce at anything I could.
Sure.
Express Iteration number 2 from Bert. Seeing another iteration in the iteration pile, as
Yeah,
they
and
tend
also
to do.
pretty importantly, seeing another unholy heat is pretty decent here for clearing off anything that could do some Mox Amber Springleaf Drum stuff. You keep that from happening for more than a turn. Although I don't know how many turns Chaz has left
Yeah,
here.
I don't think Bert's interested. I think he bottomed the Unholy Heat, put the Ragavan in exile, and then just wants to dash the Ragavan, get in for some damage. You get a Knife Trigger here, and then just beat down.
Yeah,
Just try to counter whatever Bert or Chaz plays with the treasure token plus a land drop.
and
It doesn't look like he has access to a counter spell.
if he discards a spell here, then he gets in for 5, which is a 2-turn clock. Discards that expressive iteration. We're just not playing a long enough game where he thinks that that's going to be important here.
And if he flips a Mox Hammer, that would be even gravier. But flips a Ledger Shredder, likely is not going to play it. Well, actually has no interaction in hand,
Yeah, it's
so
probably a fine.
may end up just playing
Oh,
Murktide
but
Regent.
Murktide, yeah,
Yeah, Murktide's a one
especially
card
now,
kill,
and he can
so
get it out of Unholy Heat range. Chaz is just not going to have the resources to deal with this.
3, 4, 5, 6. All spells. Here's my 8/8 dragon. Pay 2 whole mana for it.
I mean, there's a reason the deck is named after Murktide Regent. That's a big boy.
Jazz drew his card there very defeatedly. Okay, there's a Ragavan. Blocks and
Blocked.
then okay. Yeah, the dash Ragavan, hope your opponent doesn't block. I'm not even sure what you would flip to have it out there. Maybe hope your opponent has like an unsummon in their deck.
Well, the I guess Yes, I mean, I don't know what you flip that makes that work. I guess you're like hoping that they don't block because of a fear of unholy heat, but then they're just still dead to Ledger Shredder and Ragavan Dash. So there was really no way out of that
Well,
situation
I,
for
I
Chaz.
appreciate making the play because like you never know what your opponent's going to show you off the top of their deck.
Sure.
It's free, right? What's going to happen? You lose.
Yeah.
That was happening anyway.
Get a little predict out of it.
Yeah, a little scry.
Sure.
You're doing a little surveilling.
So interesting matchup here. Decks have a lot of cards in common, and in some games can play out pretty similarly. But is it very good at making those one for one trades as long as it can kind of keep the combo nature under control? The threat of a giant Murktide Regent is something that the Breach deck is not super able to deal with. What is this matchup going to look like post board?
Honestly, it's probably going to be a bunch of mid-ranging from
Hmm.
the Breach deck. The combo is so hard to get against Murktide Regent, especially post board when they board in more of their counter magic. And heaven forbid they have something like a braid or whatever. Your cards are just not that good at assembling the combo. So you want to just play a value game and try to beat with construct tokens. Dress Down does make that harder, but you can use your creatures and be conservative with your construct tokens and try to get it that way while you still have like a copy or two of the combo and maybe you can backdoor into it. So they have to be aware of it. But typically you're going to try to play a fair game and hope that the Izzet Murktide deck can't just run away with it like their Ragavan on plays very, very typically do.
Yeah, yeah, and it can be a little scary because the Breach deck only has a certain amount of removal. As we saw, blockers are very bad at stopping Ragavan from hitting you against this deck. And in this matchup, the Murktide player is happy to keep in quite a bit of removal because keeping those legendary creatures off the board makes a lot of the cards worse. So definitely some tough stuff for the Breach player to overcome here.
It's pretty nice if you can manage to like if chess can manage to get a ledger shredder in play.
Hmm.
That does quite a good job at capitalizing off of your opponent's plays.
Sure.
Which get it in early enough, you can start sculpting your hand because the breach deck does have pretty good threats, and the card Underworld Breach, even when it's not part of a combo, it's just Yawgmoth's Will, right? It's an incredibly strong value card. If you can pressure your opponent's counter spells and get a window where you can Underworld Breach, you're gonna draw a million cards off of it, either actually off Mishra's Bubble or effectively by playing a bunch of cards from your graveyard.
Yeah, and I would say that's definitely the advantage that Jeskai Breach has in this matchup. That's the hammer that Chaz is going to be relying on is the ability to just use it as a big treasure cruise or whatever your card draw analogy of choice is. Get cards in the graveyard over the course of the game and then breach to try to get a huge advantage. When the breach that got cast game one, Chaz just didn't have the mana to leverage it in the way that you would hope to. And so maybe in these post board games, he'll be able to set it up a little bit better.
Yeah, there was an opportunity for Chaz to kind of sneak that one out when the second Ledger Shredder was played. If he had drawn a grinding station there,
Hmm.
all of a sudden he can just win the game. But at the same time, you may think of that and try to like, oh, then combo is the way to go. At the same time, if Bert had just kept 2 up and mana up, I don't think Chaz could go for it.
Yeah. It's just too,
And
there's
that
too many things that can disrupt you there.
and that's not a thing you can rely on your opponent just having stolen nothing when they're playing Is It Murktide.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that Ragavan is so good is that having treasures in play allows you to represent whatever you want without committing, like leaving lands untapped for it. And then why it's such a problem for any deck, but a combo deck in particular, when Ragavan gets through and starts, getting those hits in, making those treasures.
Yep. And looks like the players are just kind of doing the shuffling, Chaz is presented, and just waiting on Bert. I'm sure Anurag is running around just trying to get everything done because these Magic tournaments for a small little production company like our friend Anurag, it was pretty tough.
Yeah, huge shout out to Anurag for setting this whole thing up, making it happen. The amount of work that goes into it, getting this set up on the site, trying to get internet somehow, getting the cameras set up and moved wherever you're told you're allowed to go to. It's a big undertaking, and I don't envy the stress that Anurag is under right now, but I do appreciate the effort he's putting in.
So here we are going into the game with, again, Chess on the play after losing game one.
Both players are Ragavan decks, and so either player would love to start with that Ragavan on turn one, although not the most likely to survive against either of these decks.
Yeah, a little more likely against the Breach deck because they've got a bunch of non-interaction,
Mhm.
but certainly Chess Hall of Fountain does not cast Ragavan. And a turn two Urza Saga into a Ledger Shredder means that Chess is probably going to try to start the mid-range game a little early.
Yeah, and this Ledger Shredder is vulnerable to the kind of like represented bolt here that Burt has up, but it would not die to an unholy heat. Mystical Dispute, often at its best when dealing with a threat like that. You think about it for Counterspell Wars, but when it's available for that and also your opponent's like 2-drop, that's when that card really shines.
Yeah, and Bird just plays a Scalding Turn and passes. But one thing to note is that if Mystical Dispute had not been cast on the Ledger Shredder, Chess has a Mox Hammer in hand, or could have had a Mishra's Bobble.
Mm-hmm.
So even at Bolt, you still get a loot out of it.
Yeah, Ledger Shredder very powerful in this deck, and I think a pretty easy decision for Burt to aim that Mystical Dispute at. It looks like Chaz is passing after missing his third land drop again after
That
playing Urza
is
Saga on turn two.
definitely not where you want to be. I think Chess was really banking on that Ledger Shredder getting a Connive trigger
Yeah,
just to try to find another land drop.
and I think generally it will there. It can't get spell pierced or anything like that,
Yeah,
and
the
a
only thing that
removal
interacts
spell.
with it that's played is Mystical Dispute.
Right, right.
And granted, Mystical Dispute is very good against the Breach deck, mostly because their threats are blue. Like, if you can counter an Emery or a Ledger Shredder, you're feeling pretty good about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, and that's you definitely have different impressions of that card versus different blue decks. And it is fine when you're trying to not get your spells countered by your opponent's, spell pierces and whatnot. But boy, when you have it available and like, okay, if they're reactive, then I can use this against their counter spells at some point. But if they're trying to be assertive, then I can just get their threat. The best deck to be playing against when you have mystical disputes is like spirits. But I think that the like Ledger Shredders and Emeries and Jeskai Breach actually make it play out really similarly against them.
So we're having some weird interactions here. Bert is cracking a fetch land in response to Chaz's third chapter of the saga, which has been floated at mana because obviously Chaz can't make a construct.
Mhm.
So now Bert has 3 mana available before the trigger resolves. I'm not sure if he's going to do anything before that. Looks like we're fishing cards.
Yeah, I
No,
have
just
not played this matchup enough, so I'm scratching my head a little bit here, I guess.
yeah, I guess maybe just wanted the mana available, play around
Oh, he's just
Pithing
playing
Needle,
around
I
Pithing
guess.
Needle, I
But I
guess.
mean, if
Yeah.
you play around Pithing Needle, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah,
Like,
it
you're not gonna
just
get a Pithing Needle here if you're in Chaz's spot, are you? Like, I would get a Mishra's Ball at the very least. Try to hit a land drop.
it's just good practice to be in.
Sure. I hope Chaz drew a land off of his draw step there. Because this, yeah, it looks like another Urza Saga, unfortunately. But at least there's an Emery, so you can make mana with Springleaf Drum if Emery resolves. So here's an Emery that should cost 2 mana, right? It's a
He has
3
one
mana card.
floating from the
Oh,
first
from the
Urza
Urza
Saga.
Saga. Thank you. So counterspell.
And with just a colorless mana up from that saga, not really anything he can do about that.
And Bert has taken a lot of time into this deck to just make all the cards pretty.
Yes. Those miscut islands are very cool looking. I do appreciate them.
I just like the old border foil fetch lands.
Sure. I mean, those are not cheap. Those are tough to source.
So there's Bert just plays a 4th land drop untapped with a Ragavan in hand and passes his turn. So it's definitely on the let's wait and see what Chess does and interact with it before deploying my own threats.
Mm-hmm. Chaz does make his land drop. He can start making constructs if that's what he wants. Bert is playing this one pretty slow and reactive, and so probably makes a lot of sense to try to eke the most value out of the cards that you have.
Yeah, I
And
literally I don't even think you can afford to play into a counterspell here. If you're
right,
Chaz, you just have to make a construct. You're kind of
yep.
locked into it. And like maybe Bert plays a Brazen Bar or a Subtlety or something with open mana, but there's nothing you can do about that. You're just gonna make a construct and do your thing.
Yeah, Izzet doesn't have like huge punishes. It's not like
Yeah.
forcing them to use their mana is keeping them off of like a memory deluge or something like that. Here's a 3/3. That's
Yeah.
uh,
And there's a subtlety. So now Chaz is thinking about whether he wants to kill this before Bert untaps. But if he does that, he does you can do that and get the construct, right? You just generate the construct, then use your spring leaf drum to kill the creature.
Mhm.
But I don't think that Unholy Heat is turned on right now.
We've got creature, land,
Enchantment
enchantment
land.
in the graveyard. Yeah. Yeah, so this unholy heat is probably best suited to helping to keep a Ragavan from hitting you this turn.
All right, so Bert is probably dashing in this Ragavan. Yep, there we go. So Ragavan does trade with Construct, but it looks like Bert's lining up a play where if Chas makes a Construct here, the Construct will get bolted.
Yeah, this is only a 2/2 here.
So here's a face down sleeve as a Construct token. Not as cool as a Charizard, I gotta say.
Well, it is leaving play right now, so I'm not too pressed about it.
Yeah, and there's Unholy Heat on the Ragavan. So you still get used out of Construct even after it dies. But I think Bert has a Spell Pierce for it. And yep, that was a very clean turn from Bert there. Gets a trigger off Ragavan and 5 damage over.
It was, and this turn where he's tapped out against Chaz, and Chaz is
Well,
resolving the.
still have a treasure token.
That's true. Still has a treasure token. That's very true. But also importantly, Chaz has no legendary creatures in play. So getting a Mox Amber here is not going to represent very much mana unless Chaz has to also put a legendary creature in play to make that work. So a lot less scary over here.
I believe Bert has a Mystical Dispute in hand, or maybe that's a Spell Pierce. I can't quite tell.
Then he's
But
pretty safe.
I know there's a 1 mana counterspell of some variety. I think it's actually both Mystical Dispute and Spell Pierce.
Well, then he's got pretty much all the bases covered here,
So Chaz
and all
chooses to make a construct.
which
Another
is about the
2/2.
best he can do in the face of these counter spells.
And it's possible, like, I know that Chaz has an Underworld Breach in hand, but without mana, Underworld
Mhm.
Breach does suffer a lot from, I don't have anything to do with this.
Yeah, and that's been the story of both games. Just not able to put together enough mana to have those huge turns that Breach can easily lead to.
So Urza Saga goes and fetches a Shadow Spear with the 3rd chapter. Uh, then Chaz plays as a Odawara, possibly leaving up his own counter magic because there was a window here to equip Shadow Spear to make it out of bolt range.
Mhm. But that would tap
At
him out
least forcing
completely.
Bert, yeah, to make a treasure, to lose a treasure to do it. But all right, consider the play from Bert, surveilling one. There's a Murktide in hand with plenty of fodder to use.
Yeah, pretty full graveyard can make a pretty quick clock for 2 mana here.
Ooh, chooses to top the card. I think we've got a Murktide, 2 red cards, and a counterspell.
Yeah,
I
one of
can't
those red
quite.
cards looks like a Fury to me, and one looks like I think there might be an iteration in hand.
I just assume they're the prettiest version. So okay, here's an Unholy Heat with Kicker or Delirium. Thanks to the first Unholy Heat.
I'd be pretty hard pressed not to make Murktide Regent here, but it could get caught by a mystical dispute, and I think that's part of the fear. There is, of course,
I
still a
don't
Ragavan in
can it?
hand as one of
You
the
can
red
just pay
cards.
for it, right?
I think he only has 4 mana left here, including that treasure.
Ah, you're right. But I think he has a Spell Pierce, so he can just Spell Pierce it back if
Yeah.
Mystical Dispute is a concern. So here's Murktide Regent, and it
Well
does
outside
not
of
think
unholy
Chaz
heat
has
range.
anything. So Ragavan's gonna come out, and now we're facing down an 8/8 in Ragavan with a 3/3 construct token.
Yeah, and that construct token, even with the Shadow Spear, just not scary versus this 8/8 Murktide Regent.
Yeah, Chaz draws a Spell Pierce, one of the full art ones. Can he utilize this Breach to do anything? Unlike Algonquil, you cannot play lands from Breach, so that kind of holds you back a little bit.
Yeah, and also quite limited on red mana. So tough to do something like breach into multiple unholy heat casts or anything like that.
Yeah, chooses to play an Iteration,
This might be a little bit
and
of a desperation iteration.
yeah, there's an Urza Lord High Artificer in this
Yeah,
pile, but
just
I've
so
never
far
seen
away
a
from
least
that.
castable card. So Urza Saga is revealed and played, but Chess does not have very much time to use that card. We're looking at a 2-turn clock here with Murktide alone.
No, and I think the only thing that really makes sense for Chaz here is to try to get to the combo somehow. I think it's just going to be really tough to play any sort of normal game here. He does have a breach in hand. I
Well,
don't,
yeah.
I don't believe he has a grinding station though.
No, you'd probably have to middle into it. He can. I'm assuming that Chaz has access to an Aether Spell Bomb.
Mhm.
If he draws that, because I don't think he has time to fetch it off of the uh, Urza Saga, you can buy yourself a turn of Murktide Regent. Though, if I'm looking at Bert's hand correctly, there's just second Murktide Regent. I don't know how many spells Bert has left in the graveyard, but that could make the math a little trickier. Or
And he is going to
suddenly,
have to defend against this. You know, if he starts swinging with this Murktide Regent and that construct gets lifelink and starts coming in, that really slows that clock down.
I think the dress down Bert just drew kind of clinches it because that turns off the
Oh,
combo if there's a Thassa's Oracle.
that's a
So
very good draw.
as long as Bert keeps open dress down, maybe a counterspell, though I think Chess can't afford to play around counterspell with facing 8 damage return.
Hmm. The dress down, of course, also kills the construct token, so solves that problem as well.
And this is kind of Bert's game to lose, basically. He's got the threats, he's got really good answers in his hand,
Hmm.
and Chess does not have anything going on, really. Like, you're going to equip this construct and attack for 5, maybe?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge risk versus dress down, unholy heat, everything else. That's just tough to make happen. Although I guess Bert probably does not have delirium right now, so I guess slightly fewer answers to that. It's like Bert deciding whether or not to cast this. I believe Fury in his hand.
Yeah, I think it's Fury. You do have to tap out for it, and
Mhm.
you're basically just getting a construct. I mean, you could choose to kill the Ledger Shredder. That's not a bad choice either. But I think the dress down covers most of what you're afraid of. It's
I
just
Yeah, I think so too.
okay. We're asking you a judge question, which means it's obviously he's got a dress down at hand.
What?
uh,
Yeah, no other card has prompted more preemptive judge questions than dress down.
f- yeah. Fun fact about judge calls is that, or dress down, it's like 50% of judge calls now about rules in modern. All right, we haven't quite updated the life totals yet, but I do want to note that Chaz is dead to the next Murktide hit. So chooses to play the Fury, killing the Construct token and not the Ledger Shredder. Huh. That's
Yeah, I mean Chaz just has a window here.
yeah, I don't know how likely he is to hit it, but this is his turn.
Yeah, it's possible now.
All right, draws a blue card, I think. Now he does for this combo need a Underworld Breach, a Grinding Station, and a blue legend.
Yeah,
None of
and
which
with
he
no
has in
legends
play.
in play, it becomes very difficult to generate the kind of mana that would allow him to kind of churn through his deck in any way. You know, if there were some sort of like Emery and Mox Amber thing, so he could do some milling, but I'm just not sure that we have the resources to pull that off in the graveyard hand and in play, even combining all of those.
I think maybe you can skimp on the blue legend. You just play Breach, Grinding Station, assuming these cards exist, which
Hmm.
I don't think they do since they'd already been played. You can use a blue mana for Springleaf Drum, and then you can once you find a Mox Amber as your 0,
Hmm.
you can then use that as mana. But
Yeah.
because Chaz has no 0, Grinding Station, Breach, or Legend, I think this was the safest turn Burt could have to tap out if he chooses
Sure.
to tap out. Now, this Ledger Shredder, basically, you're just trying to figure out how to best trigger this Ledger Shredder. Like, what does your winning turn look like? Because you're not going to win if the game goes past this turn.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would be surprised by any turn here that does not include Underworld Breach as part of it.
I think the trouble is casting a second spell.
Yeah.
Uh, that's a land, I believe, on top. Some sort of fetch land, and then you've got
Well,
the
and he's
Underworld
just
Breach.
so constricted on red mana here too. Uh, there are those unholy heats in the graveyard, but he's only got one red land and one Springleaf Drum as red sources. I mean, I think we're trying to do something with a value breach here this turn, probably, and just trying to figure out what's the best way of doing that. Can this Murktide Regent get taken off the board?
I mean, that would be two Unholy Heats, and you have to make sure you have enough Delirium and cards in graveyard to make that a possibility.
Sure, but here's a fetch.
I guess it's an 8/8, right? So you only actually need a Delirium one and a non-Delirium one.
Yeah, I think this Murktide Regent is leaving the battlefield this turn.
No baubles or anything to get cards off of this Underworld Breach. Uh, I think there is a Ragavan. So here's
There's an
Emery.
Emery.
That's a good turn to start with because you do
Yeah.
need to, if you hit the grinding station, you could win. So you can choose to order your connive or your mill in any order. Actually, you need to do the connive first and then the mill. Sorry, that's incorrect.
Yes, it triggers off of the spell. Uh, it looks like, yeah, we're just paying the Underworld Breach cost, the escape cost, and now to connive. I mean, hitting a Mox Amber during any of this would be a pretty big deal, potentially.
A huge deal, but I don't know if you can do anything with it.
Yeah. Yeah, without a
Like we're
second Emery, you can't really cycle them back and forth.
There's an Aether Spell Bomb, so it does exist.
Does.
That's actually a really good hit here.
Yeah, you could do that instead of Unholy Heating the Murktide Regent, could just bounce it here.
I think there's only one card in Bert's hand, right?
Hmm.
So that we know there's not Force Negation at play here. So I think Chaz still wants to double Unholy Heat and then just play the Aether Spell Bomb.
That's true. Could do that. Could spell bomb to bounce the Murktide Regent and Unholy Heat the Fury and leave Bert with just like a bare board.
Yeah, it looks like that's maybe what he's trying to set up here.
Yeah, the Breach is just
Uh,
quite a card.
yeah, Underworld Breach is very good. Okay, so there's Unholy Heat on the Fury and Aether Spell Bomb from the graveyard with a blue mana open. So gotta leave this Thassa's Oracle in the graveyard if he's gonna want to try to combo.
Yeah.
So Ledger Shredder, Unholy Heat, and Saga are the picks.
Yeah, so still left in the graveyard, Thassa's Oracle, Urza Saga, and Expressive Iteration, and now Spellbomb. So easily has Delirium for any future Unholy Heats, although the Unholy Heats are gone for now.
So the get in versus two versus the hold back for Ragavan debate, I think, is raging in Chess's mind right now. And we choose to get in for two. Ragavan is not real. You cannot hurt me. I think you just drew. I think Bert just drew a Ragavan.
Good for Bert. Yeah, this one is tight, and I mean Chaz has really clawed his way back into it. Has a lot of resources now. Has 4 real lands in play in addition to that Urza Saga that's about to go to the graveyard on his turn. Has a Springleaf Drum with enough creatures that he can likely get a mana off of it. Ledger Shredder and Emery each represent just abilities to find the things that you need, and you know, just casting that spellbomb from the graveyard with the Emery can really hamstring Bert's ability to finish this game. There is
Here's
that
a
Ragavan.
yeah dash and attack Ragavan. As a reminder, a bolt off Chas's deck is lethal,
Yeah,
and that's not. It's a land. Murktide is castable, but I think it will be quite small if
quite
chosen
small
to be
and
cast.
quite costly, and you know all that's going to happen. You know your payoff for spending mana and your graveyard cards on a Murktide is that forces Chaz to spellbomb it. So is that worth it? I don't know. And then Chaz is going to get a chance to maybe equip a Shadow Spear and attack or something, get himself out of this bolt range. Uh, kind of a rough spot for Bert now.
Right, passing a turn back to Chaz. Bert's hand is a Ragavan, 2 Murktides, and a Dress Down. This was a good hand when you could have a Murktide in play, but
Hmm.
without that, you're just kind of letting Chaz do whatever he wants.
Yeah, hitting that
Uh,
either spellbomb just gigantic here.
yeah, that honestly a huge get for Chaz.
Yeah,
Maybe signaling he should have fetched it instead of a Shadow Spear.
yeah, potentially. But I think the Shadow Spear is going to become relevant pretty soon. Chaz is going to
Eh,
really want to get
it
out
only
of.
becomes relevant after you either spell bomb, you know.
Yeah, sure. Then you should have switched the order that you got them in. But
And if Chaz wants to just draw cards with Emery, you can choose to get Ambitious Bubble off of this Saka. I think Chaz is determining whether he wants to float mana or make a construct.
yeah,
Just goes for
that,
floating mana. And now it's tutor time. Got the Mox Amber, get some more mana development, For a player who can't seem to find his third land drop on time, has recovered quite nicely.
yeah. I mean, it just has plenty of mana now, and that main constraint that he was operating under, he has been freed from and has access to a lot of cards.
So here's 3 mana for Teferi. It would have been excellent if Chaz could have fit it in last turn to bounce the Breach Dam, but it's still just as good this turn.
And is going to give him the the confidence that he needs. He'll be able to equip the Shadow Spear to a Ledger Shredder and get a hit in if he so chooses, and know that his creature is not going to uh, get killed by a removal spell in response.
So here's a dress down in response to Teferi. This will shut off Ledger Shredder's Connive ability as well as Emery. So what? Of course, dress down is being on the stack. There needs to be a judge call. Yeah, that's just how modern works. So one thing Chaz can do is activate Emery, targeting the Ether Spellbomb in response to Stress Down,
Hmm.
and will still be able to cast the Ether Spellbomb after Dress Down resolves. That's not
Right.
contingent on Emery having abilities.
Right. This Teferi, though, the first spell of the turn, the Ledger Shredder will not have its ability by the time Chaz's second spell of the turn goes on the stack.
All right, so Emery is being used, I think. Yeah, I'm positive that's what the judge call is about now.
Yeah. Can I still cast this either
The
spell
judge,
bomb?
yeah, they're just asking the judge again. All right, so card drawn off of Dress Down. I think there's only one artifact in the graveyard, so I'm assuming that's an Ether Spellbomb target.
Yes, I think that's the only thing Emery could have targeted. We're going to do a little classic, perhaps making mana with Mox Amber, bouncing it with Teferi. I'm not sure what our mana constrictions are that turn, if that's what
We're
Chaz wants
equipping
to do
Shadow
here.
Spear.
Yeah.
So
That
Shadow
makes
Spear
sense.
does still grant lifelink if it's attached after the dress down comes down. So this is
Yep.
going to be a very important life total swing for Chaz, getting out of range of Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, and that Teferi really key here because it denied Bert the ability to stop that lifelink hit from happening, and so cuts off a lot of possible top decks here.
Goes to down tick a Mox Teferi on Mox Amper. Bert says, "How about dress down? You want to bounce that to my hand?"
Yeah,
And Chaz declines.
I could use that next turn.
And here's the Ether Spell Bomb from the replayed Mox Amber mana. So that's Ragavan protection by itself if necessary, due to the bounce ability on Ether Spell Bomb.
Yep.
Life totals are a little wrong here. I believe Bert is down to 10 and Chaz is up to 5. Or
I think
11,
11 and
excuse me.
5, yeah, and I mean that's important. Much better to be at 5 than at 2 versus a deck with
Yeah,
lightning
if that
bolts in
dress
it.
down had drawn a bolt, the game would be over and Bert would be walking into a beta draft right now.
I see something in Bert's hand that looks like a bolt, but it's a little hard to
I
tell. I
believe
don't
it's
know
a
if he.
fetch land
Okay.
because I thought the same thing. It's a very pretty land, I believe, but so here's an iteration.
Looks like that's being cast off of 2 islands here, so
Yeah, probably not a legal play that you can make, but I'm confident it will get fixed. Hopefully before another
oh,
red
is that
spell
a
is
steam
cast.
vents? Okay.
So Ragavan is the revealed card. I think that's a spell pierce that went to hand.
I guess that just looks it's the guild symbol that's making me think that's an island, but that's a steam vents.
All right, so now Bert has to make his way against all these threats that Chaz has brought to bear, which includes a Teferi, making it a little harder to play, you know, impossible to play on Chaz's turn.
Yeah, and
Ha-
this, there's a subtlety in Bert's hand now that is just a phantom monster. Not great. Bert has threats in hand, but all of them are pretty bad versus this Ether Spellbomb Emery engine, and Chaz just kind of slowly pulling away and kind of locking Bert out of this game.
yeah, it's kind of like what I was saying in the in between rounds. Like the
Mhm.
combo is not that great, but Underworld Breach is so good.
Yeah, just kind of did everything Chaz needed to do here.
So now Bert
Put
can't even play a Murktide Regent because it'll just get bounced to hand with this Ether Spell Bomb.
Yep.
And though Bert won't be actually dead on the crackback, you've done nothing with an entire turn.
Yeah, and none of his options are really ones that do anything versus either Spellbomb.
So Bert goes to cast the Ragavan in hand, chooses, wait, I just exiled one off Express Iteration, so plays that one instead.
Sure. Great.
And then Chaz connives away a Flooded Strand. So that Ledger Shredder does not get larger. This is a rough spot for her to be in.
Yeah, as long as he can't clear this Emery off the table, just those iterated Ether spell bombs stop everything that he wants to do. That Murktide region is only a 4/4.
Yeah, and it just dies to Unholy Heat. And then Chaz gets to untap with, the world at his disposal.
I think Chaz,
No,
yeah, uh, just getting the each turn that 3 life drain from this Ledger Shredder with a Shadow Spear attached to it, like he's just making progress in exactly the way he needs to when Bert really just can't do anything to advance his own game state. Either Spellbomb has just stopped Murktide Regent as a card completely, and also makes Ragavaning very difficult.
So we are cycling with the Aether Spell Bomb instead of using it to bounce Ragavan. But here comes the Spell Bomb back.
Yeah, bouncing the Ragavan during your turn main phase is not the most effective use of an Ether Spell Bomb.
Yeah, just gonna Lightning Bolt it and then get the Connive trigger. This Ledger Shredder up to a 4-power creature now.
Yep.
So very quickly getting out of the range of Bert's reach.
Yeah, and I mean, Bert exiled his graveyard the turn before. I don't even know if he has. I mean, he does not have Delirium right now.
Right, so a 10-point life swing there.
8 points, right? Oh, yeah, 8 points, right? To
One,
be,
two, three, four. Yeah, you're right. I'm not a counter.
but it's plenty of a life swing to really be just putting Bert more and more in the graveyard each turn. You're right. This is just not a combo centered matchup. You use your Underworld Breach as a big old card drawing card, get the resources you need. It was multiple removal spells and an Emery for Chaz, and that was enough resources that uh, just cheap spells and expressive iterations from a Murktide player are not going to be able to keep up with that, especially if the dragon gets kept under control, which is kind of the way that you get out from under, like, oh, my opponent's cards are really good, but sometimes I can just attack them for 8 twice. Not available when that spell bomb shows up.
Yeah, the way I think that Bert makes it out of this one is he has Fury and a Lightning Bolt this turn, but I don't think he has all three of those red cards. He
Yeah.
has a Bolt and a Ragavan, but no Fury. That's
Interesting.
the
So
only way I
that
could
that
see it
was a
cleaning up.
bolt that he had before. So that was a bolt. Uh,
It was the previous turn, not obviously if he drew off Trust Down, the game would be over.
sure. I'm just kind of surprised that he would not choose to kill either Emery or Teferi over making other plays on his turn.
I do think killing Emery is a lot better than casting a Murktide Regent.
Yeah, I
That's going to
agree.
be bounced. But you couldn't play Ragavan and Express Veneration and Bolt with only 2 red mana.
And this Ledger Shredder continues to grow.
So Ragavan tries to kill Teferi, but gets bounced back to hand with the Aether Spell Bomb. And then finally the Emery dies.
Yeah.
So no more Aether Spell Bomb looping until, oh, there's an Underworld Breach. Bolt, bolt, bolt. Yep, that's it. That's all she wrote. So going into a game 3, winner of this one gets to draft beta.
Yeah, that's what these players are playing for. We are in the top 16, single elimination rounds at the end of the modern main event. Whoever wins makes top 8, gets to play the triple beta draft, which we will hopefully be getting to cover. Probably mostly just the opening up of packs and taking of cards. I'm not sure if we're going to see any of the games. That's kind of less the point of the draft, but I am excited to see what our players get to open.
The point of the beta draft is to open very expensive cards from early Magic history from the set that came out when many Magic players had not yet been born.
Yes, these cards are not quite older than me, but they are older than a lot of players who I have played against. So, uh,
Yeah, yeah.
Magic has hit that point, 30th birthday, and a lot of these cards that players are going to open today are kind of like the cards that legends are told about. I don't know. There's something really magical about beta that
Yeah.
you can't quite access in any other way.
And you just don't get to appreciate the history very much anymore.
Hmm.
It's so far removed now that mostly when you hear people talking about it, it's like, oh, those old fogies who was playing when they were in high school in 1990s are just talking about Magic again.
I mean, that's kind of us, yeah.
No, I was 2 years old when Beta came out. I'm
I
not
know,
that
but at
far
some point
removed.
we become the old fogies. It's inescapable. Father Time is undefeated.
Yeah, but then you have people like Nathan Stoyer, who's definitely born after Beta was released
Hmm.
and just can't lose Magic games. So,
Oh yeah, I mean, like I'm not saying that being an old fogey makes you particularly good at the game or anything like that. I'm just saying that's where we're headed.
well, bring it on. I'm going to Magic retirement. if I can draft beta when I'm in Magic retirement, that'll be,
That doesn't seem like something that we're ever likely to get a chance to do, but that was the game, as we will recall. The second game in which Chaz made his second land drop of Urza Saga and missed his third land drop. He was able to get out of it this time, though. The power of Underworld Breach really picking him up out of a hole that his deck had dug him into.
I think it's the display of two different types of powerful plays. Like the first game, he had the same kind of deal, whereas
Mhm.
second land was Urza Saga. But that game, Bert had a Ragavan on the play, which is kind of its own Underworld Breach in the
Mhm.
Izzet Murktide deck. Like that's really the reason to play this deck. I think it just
Absolutely.
does so well with Ragavan on the play, or Ragavan turn one really. And then on game two, when Chaz was on the play, he had the same thing happen with the no third land drop. But Bert didn't have any pressure, if you recall. He didn't play any creatures for the first 4 or 5 turns. His
Yeah.
first play was a end of turn subtlety after Chaz chose to do nothing.
Yeah, and playing this purely reactive game against a deck like Jeskai Breach, there's a lot of things that can go wrong there. And I mean, the Murktide deck is really built like your cards are a lot better if you have a creature attacking when you're casting your cards.
Yeah, way, way better. That's kind of like why Murktide exists as a creature, right? You get to play it for very cheap mana. It's
Hmm.
very large, and you get to leave open all of the rest of your mana.
Yeah.
It's it's one of the better tempo oriented plays of that nature in modern.
And Bert now gets the advantage. He is going to be on the play this game. It is much easier to land a Murktide Regent without like either getting killed or just like catching the fear that makes you not cast a Murktide Regent when probably you should just put it out there. So Chaz has some real problems to deal with here in just the creatures on the play coming out, being ready to attack, and then the
Oh,
disruption being very good when you're putting that pressure on. Looks like a turn one Ragavan from Bert to start with.
yeah, you gotta there we go. Switch into the game camera so everyone can see the lovely turn one Ragavan. And hopefully Chaz has some sort of answer, but I don't think yep, there's lightning bolt. Boom.
Ooh, test
Ragavan
number
is
one
not going to
pass.
be an issue here.
Yep.
So choosing to play out the Mishra's Ball makes me think it's going to be cracked pretty soon. Otherwise, you would usually want to hold it in hand for a Ledger Shredder.
Yeah, could possibly be low on lands, just trying to get a little bit deeper and have those draws be smoothed out, but not cracking it quite yet. So at least has the second land lined up.
Okay, so here's Emery, discounted by the Mishra's Bauble. Even if Bert has a Lightning Bolt or an Unholy Heat, which are good answers to Emery, you do still get the mill. So any Underworld breaches Chaz draws later in the game will at least be fueled a little bit.
Yep. Also turns on your Unholy Heats.
Yep, so Mishra's Ball was going to take a look at Bert's top card. And I think Bert is lining up this Lightning Bolt to kill Emery with end of turn. Unholy
Yeah,
Heat.
that one is not sticking around.
Yep. So Chaz draws from his bauble, and it's a Underworld Breach. A good card, but you still do need mana to utilize it. Bert still does not have a threat after that turn one Archivant.
Yeah, and that's really tough. That's just, again, a really tough spot for the Murktide deck to be in. He has good disruptive spells, but just kind of trading one for one and trying to uh, be a reactive deck with Expressive Iteration as your refill against a deck that really just at some point in the game needs to land that Underworld Breach. And the more time Bert gives Chaz to do that, the more likely it is that he's going to get buried under a pile of cards.
So I wonder if Chaz just plays Grinding Station here. So it goes land into Express Federation, presumably to leave open Spell Pierce, but I don't know if you Spell Pierce it back. What I was thinking, because Chaz does have the one Grinding Station or a Grinding Station in his hand,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you just play the Grinding Station and try to bait out a counterspell. If it doesn't, Bert's not going to have a threat. So you either get a counterspell or you get a Grinding Station in play. Either of which is fine. It's
Yeah, I
certainly
wonder
the
how
card you want
highly he's
countered.
valuing getting that grinding station in play right now. I that that land expressive iteration in play is really interesting, and I'm not even confident that I would counter that there. I mean, Chaz does have a number of ones and zeros that he could hit off of that, but it's mostly what Ragavans, Mox Ambers, and Mishra's Baubles that he could hit off of the Expressive Iteration as the spell he could cast that turn.
Yeah, the Shadow Spear and the Ringleader Drum are both in the graveyard thanks to Imri.
Mm-hmm.
And the removal spells are not going to really be a factor when Bert
Right,
has nothing in
exactly.
play.
But I think every turn that goes by, this gets better for Chaz and rougher for Bert.
So here's iteration without a land played first. Yeah, the long games do definitely favor the Breach player. Not necessarily because of the combo, though that is a factor. Mostly because of the card Underworld Breach. Like
Yes.
the more you spend time stockpiling your graveyard and making land drops, the stronger and stronger that card gets.
Yeah, and we have not seen a card like Relic of Progenitus out of Bert. A lot of those have been kind of replaced by unlicensed hearses, which cost a little more mana and don't do a great job of, getting rid of a stocked graveyard that's just waiting for an Underworld Breach to happen. So I don't know if Bert has a way to kind of address the fact that, there's 10
It
cards in the
looks
graveyard now?
it kind of looks like Bert is flooding out this game. I see at least 2 lands in play and a lightning bolt.
Hmm.
So maybe Bert just doesn't have things to do.
Yeah.
There's a Ledger Shredder, but I don't think he has a second spell. Yeah, he just passes it back. The good news is you can still trigger Connive off of Chaz's double spell turns, but I think Chaz is just not going to do that.
Yeah, Chaz
Looks
is
like he's got
pretty
a
aware of
Teferi
that.
lined up. So Teferi is going to bounce the Ledger Shredder. That puts Teferi down to 1. Chaz gets a card. Bert does have a pretty good turn lined up with Ledger Shredder into Lightning Bolt, the Teferi, and rummage away his land.
Hmm.
So not the end of the world. It actually gives him a Connive trigger, which is not something he had.
Yes.
So it looks like Chaz is using his Mox Ambers to play an Underworld Reach. This is a neat thing because now he can Grinding Station and I believe win the game.
Yeah, I think that's it.
If yeah, and since there's a Teferi in play, Bert has no interaction to this. So you
Yep.
just play Mox Amber, play Mox Amber. That's blue mana. Then he has a Grinding Station in hand, which we know about, but Bert does not. So
Bert
you
probably
can
suspects after this breach has been cast on this turn,
so here's a Grinding Station,
and that ought to do it.
and you just sacrifice the Mox Ambers. Keep getting blue mana off the Teferi and the Mox Ambers, then cast Thassa's Oracle, which we have seen in game 2. It went to the graveyard. So unless Chaz boarded it out, this should be his victory lap here. And we're just kind of going through the combo semi-quickly here. Bert wants to play it out, which is your right as a person, a competitor.
That Thassa's Oracle getting flipped into the graveyard, kind of, it's all very mechanical from here.
Yeah, the writing's on the wall. Every time I'm gonna iterate this loop, I'm going to exile the top 3 cards of my library. You can even make it simpler now because you have the Thassa's Oracle. You don't have to make decisions.
Hmm.
You're just like, this is the loop I'm going to iterate. I'm going to sacrifice Mox Amber to Grinding Station, mill 3 cards, replay it, exile the top 3 cards I just milled, make a blue mana, sack it again, and just repeat that for X number of cards in your library. Because you have the Thassa's Oracle and its Teferi in place, your opponent can do nothing. You just play
Yeah,
the Thassa's Oracle, and
not
you're
a
good
lot
to
of thought
go.
required when your opponent is not allowed to cast spells.
Yeah. You do kind of have to be worried about Odawara a little bit, but with no 4 mana over on Bert's side, not a consideration.
Yeah, and also a thing that you could play around in this spot pretty easily.
Yes, of course. And this is just how the combo works. You're gonna mill your entire deck, replaying your same Mox Amber every time. Every time it hits the battlefield, you get to tap it for blue mana. That's what this die is representing, blue mana. I'm assuming it could be white mana, but I doubt it.
Less likely to be white mana.
I mean, if your opponent does make you play it out like this, you can like start flexing on them and just cast different spells from the graveyard for every excess of 3 cards in your graveyard you have. Uh, but that's not necessary here. Actually, it's never necessary, but it is fun.
Just get all of your ledger shredders in play.
put a Shadow Spear into play. Equip it to
Sure.
something.
Sure, that something with summoning sickness. Make sure that your opponent's stuff doesn't have hexproof this turn.
Yeah, of course. Like all the things you need to do to dot your I's, cross your T's.
Yeah. You don't have hexproof? Okay, well then I'll cast this Thassa's Oracle with an empty library.
I'm impressed that Chaz is continuing to add mana to his mana pool. I don't think I would have done that after reaching like, 4 or whatever, some number that's not relevant. So you can't cast Lightning Bolt. So yeah.
Yeah, we're done. We've been done for a minute. Chad's going to be able to go on to the top 8 draft, beta, 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 and hopefully we get a chance to see what cards these players open.
Yeah, you really want to see the Black Lotuses, of course. But what's the non-power beta card? If you weren't motivated completely by price, that you would
Completely by
want to see
price.
someone open.
I mean, is it too just like generic Magic player to just love Beta Shivan Dragon?
No, I think that's a fine answer. Like it's a classic card for a reason.
Yeah.
I think Shivan Dragon's a fine choice.
I wouldn't
I
I
would
wouldn't hate opening a Shivan Dragon. That's all.
I would want a copy artifact because it's one of the
Ooh.
cards that's very hard to get. It's on the reserve list and it's extremely expensive. And I've wanted to put it in my cube.
And then if you could just put a beta one in your cube,
Yeah, that would be the ultimate flex, right?
game over.
Yeah. The beta packs are real. You do keep them. That's the prize for this tournament. That's the whole. Okay,
I think
so yeah, go ahead.
yes. Sounds like we are about to go to a break. And I think when we get back, we will be covering that draft. Don't know how long that's going to take to start out, but ideally, that's what we'll be bringing y'all, and we'll see y'all then.
All right.
All right, I know it took a long time, but I really was trying to figure out everything that could be done here. I have bad news. I will not be streaming the beta draft. I have good news, is that Wizards will be taking care of that whole thing. I don't think it'll be live, but that's okay. It'll still be captured in somehow. I think there's a lot of people that are starting to walk up to the beta draft area, so maybe someone over there might be recording it and things like that. It's not the answer I really wanted to give, but it is what it is. Yeah, I got some other work to take care of today as well, so I'm gonna start by cleaning up my area here, and then I'll go over there and see what could be done. Maybe Will can operate some stuff because we have a lot of equipment. There are certain rules that we can abide by that are okay, but it's not gonna be, I don't think it's gonna be like watchable content, you know what I mean? So like, let me explain to you. So I'll give you a good visual, right? One sec. All right, can you guys all still hear me?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm mic'd up right now. Should I mute? Oh, is it something? Okay. Okay, so here is what I will say. You see this blue sleeve right here? I will explain to you the problem. This blue sleeve right here, right? Assume this is like a card from the pack.
If it says gold area, you will likely
Excuse me?
go over to. It was blue, but I was told we were moved.
All right, I moved the blue sleeve, and I want to see if I want to represent to you the distance of the draft from where I might be. So I'm going to take my camera, and let's see, how do I do this? Okay, can you see the blue sleeve? Right. So this is about the distance from where my camera would be to where the blue sleeve would be. That is very far, and if I tried it, I do not think anyone would really be able to watch it. Like you can't tell what that card is. Hell, if you could even read the number, that would be quite impressive. So, oh shit. Don't drop. All in all, I think there'll probably be some coverage on their media sites and things like that. There'll be B-roll. They're going to publish some stuff about it later. They are recording the entire thing, so the content will exist somewhere. So that is that. 27 Lotus. Can you actually? Hold up. Wait. Okay, I will spot check you. Ready? All right, I put a life pad thing there. If you can tell me, I mean, and maybe it's also just like my fault for not. Can you even tell me like hold up. If I like shrink this is peak content right here. Oh, god damn it. I need a card. Hey Jeremy, do you have a card, like a magic card? Is it legible? I mean, not legible. Can you tell what the card is from the image? Like I zoomed in. Oh, and I can also change the focus. Wait. Hold up. Bro, you can see that shit. All right, I guess I'm gonna try to relocate and let Will do the thing. I will not be running it, but I will let Will do the thing. I do have to stop the stream though, and then maybe we can get this shit to work. Maybe we can get this shit to work. Okay. All right. That's all I gotta say. Bye guys. I'll be back in a little bit, and I'll talk to Will.